There is a red button under the video, so please subscribe. Thank you.
Uber drivers, what's the deepest secrets you've overheard in your car? I picked up this young overly affectionate couple that spent the entire trip making out in my backseat and telling each other that they loved each other. Cute. So I drop off the couple and head on my way to pick up my text fare. I hear a cell phone ring in my backseat, realize it's my previous rides, and pick up the phone to let them know I have it and I'll come back to drop it off. Turns out it was the guy's wife phoning to check in on him while he was on a business trip, which he was thoroughly enjoying with his mistress. One time I was driving a dude for a bit of a long trip, was gonna take around 25 to 30 minutes. He wasn't hammered, but definitely a bit drunk. It was late, and he must have been feeling a bit down, so he confided in me and asked me for some advice. He told me he's madly in love with his fiance's best friend and he couldn't back out now. He'd been with this girl for years and engaged for one, ready to be married in a few months. It was pretty sad to hear because it wasn't just your average story. It was filled with a lot of subtle emotional and mental anguish. The guy went through about 5 years of ups and downs with his girl and found an innocent friend and comfort in the best friend. After a few years, he developed feelings and it was just downhill from there. Felt bad for the guy because he seemed like he was truly in love with his fiancée too. Although he had strong feelings for this friend, he knew that going through with the marriage meant a lifetime of being around the friend and suppressing feelings, but also breaking it off meant that he lost the girl of his dreams. Seemed like a genuinely nice guy, and I hoped he's doing okay. Uber passenger here had a driver tell me he was changing his name to Nilram because it was Malin spelled backward and he was a wizard. Picked up two dudes. They were talking about how they were going to keep hiding their relationship from their wives and children. Pretty messed up stuff. Former Uber driver here. Picked a girl up, a sweet girl, from a bar on a Wednesday night. Absolutely hammered. About 10 p.m. She got into my car, apologized for being so drunk and politely asked if we could just drive around a little while with the windows down. I was prepping for a cleaning fee, trying to drive and pull a vomit bag out of the glove box, but no, she just did that airplane thing with one hand out the backseat window. She asked me if I had ever thought about dying, to which I replied, yeah, I guess so. That's when she told me that she had cancer. It was in her brain, and it was too far gone to consider chemotherapy. I remember my heart just pounding. She told me she was dying, and she was going to be okay. Tonight she was celebrating with her work friends who threw her a going away party. She told them she was taking a position abroad. I just didn't tell them that abroad was heaven. Jesus. King. Christ. I turned off my app and cried my all the way home. It wasn't so much weird as it was random, but my first night driving for Uber/Lyft, I picked up a dude at 2:30 a.m. that was finishing up a pub crawl. The dude was dressed in a purple dinosaur onishi and was hammered. He got in and started telling me his entire life story and how he came out to his parents and moved across the country the next day. Took this 19-year-old kid and what I assumed was his GF back to her house on Pride weekend in SF. They made out the whole ride. When I dropped them off, only she got out. He said take me to Castro and 18th. I said really? And he said yeah, I only make out with girls when I'm rolling. Never a dull moment in San Francisco. I picked someone up here in Memphis and took them to a shady apartment. They came out smelling like some really good kush. I asked them to go back in and get me some. Got paid, got weed, and got a new dealer out of it. Drove Uber one night. It was pretty tame until I picked up two guys who wanted to go to a strip club 40 miles away. As they requested an Uber Select fare, I was happy to drive that far. $80 to $100. It took them 15 minutes to get ready and into the car and they seemed cool, so I wasn't worried. As soon as we got on the freeway, the guy in the passenger seat started asking about Uber driving and things got dark. After a few minutes he started saying like, what would you do if someone just grabbed the steering wheel and ran the car into the median, and have you ever thought about what would happen if someone in the backseat tried to strangle you while you were driving? I got a little freaked out and tried to lighten the mood by asking what they were celebrating, etc. But the one guy just kept at it. I was happy to get to the strip club and get them the hell out of the car. Bonus was the bouncer at the club gave me $40 for dropping them off there. I never drove Uber again. I know this is the opposite of what you asked, because I'm a passenger not a driver. I had an Iraqi driver tell me he was an engineer in Iraq before the first Gulf War, and he developed a superior means of gilding furniture, chandeliers etc., which you can imagine was hot in pre-war Haseen-vile. Well, Uday wanted to go into business with him, but, and this is a direct quote, first Uday wants to be your partner in business, then he wants to be partner in your wife. Words to live by. Once I had an extremely drunk middle-aged couple fight for an entire 30-minute ride. They attempted to bring me into their fight many times. I just pretended like I was deaf and didn't answer when they tried to rope me into it. Two 40-something guys who I picked up from a bar were talking on a phone speaker, and they were trying to make plans with a third guy who was at a party with a bunch of drunk 12th graders. Exact words. One guy in my car asked if there was anyone younger there. Other dude said dude really, followed by silence. Then he said king sweet. Not sure as there was missing context, but it sounded like there was younger teenagers there already drunk and these older dudes were going to pick up. I haven't really heard anything too juicy, but so far my favorite was this one. I picked up two guys in downtown LA. From their conversation I gather they just met at the bar I picked them up from and were going home to hook up. One was younger and clean cut, the other was older and rather scruffy. So I'm driving up Main Street to the 101 and the scruffy guy starts talking about how he used to live there in the 90s and it was a whole lot scummier back then. He mentions he used to have an older boyfriend back then. The boyfriend would call the scruffy guy and tell him to walk down to the sidewalk in a tied-off shirt and Daisy Dukes. Then the boyfriend would drive up in his car and the scruffy guy would lean in his window and the boyfriend would ask him how much and the scruffy guy would get in and they'd role play that he was a prostitute and the boyfriend was his John. The clean cut guy kinda glossed over this and moved the conversation along, but I thought to myself that scenario sounds hot as hell. My friend Ubers in my hometown picked up some really nice girls out on first Friday. They are talking about their plans for next autumn. Guy thinks he recognizes one of them, turns out to be my younger sister, and he tells me all about it. And that's how I found out my little sister was moving to Spain. I picked up a guy from a gay bar, and he was noticeably coming on to me. He then confessed that he was one of the founders of a very popular gaming company and offered me $2,000 to come up to his room. He also refused to leave my car unless I kissed his hand. Fun times. Picked up a girl mid-Saturday. She was a bit upset and a little teary and opened up to me. Turned out a business she had started was failing and she was in debt and had turned to stripping on the side to cover the bills. She said the pay was good, but she kept getting really sick from all the booze she felt obliged to drink. Part of her job was making guys spend money at the bar. She hated it and felt trapped and kept asking me what I would do in her situation. I'm a guy, so kind of hard for me to answer. Tried to give her the best advice I could think of, like getting the tax office to withhold tax for a while, but couldn't help really. Only thing I could do was end the trip early. Not my story, but I asked a friend to tell me his that he has shared with me before. I was once driving for Uber and picked up two young Spanish guys, 25 maybe. They were clean cut, spoke English very well, and were really polite. The first thing that seemed off was that both decided to sit in the back, when typically one of two people would usually ride shotgun. It was quiet for a bit after the usual small talk I made, and then they started speaking to each other in Spanish. I know some Spanish, but I wasn't really trying to listen in on their conversation, but with how quiet they were speaking I decided they were trying to be secretive, so I started doing my best to eavesdrop. This became kind of easy because they started getting louder and it was obvious they were arguing. Now my Spanish is poor, but I think kept hearing me, you, they, where, and location. I'm not sure what the one finally said to the other, but they stopped arguing and that's when I heard you get out, and the Spanish form used was a to command, which I had learned in Spanish was a very disrespectful way to speak to someone. Then there was a lot of arguing where I could only really hear get out, and I paid for a short while, but finally they stopped, and one of them said very politely, "My friend forgot his date tonight. Could you please let him out here so he can walk home before we get further away?" I was conflicted, but I complied with his request and decided I must have been interpreting their conversation wrong. The one getting out thanked me for the ride, apologized for the inconvenience, said one more thing in Spanish to his friend before he left. After that, I thought I had definitely misunderstood them. But then, the dude asks if I can change the destination, saying his plans have changed now due to his friend's date. I said of course, now getting very suspicious, but trying to tell myself I was overreacting. It was a long drive, longer than the first destination, and we began to leave town. Finally I pull up to this old farmhouse that looked abandoned, but figured it must have just been his place, and was a bit shabby, but when the guy got out, he didn't walk toward the house, he just kinda stood there and said bye. Being suspicious, I drove off down the road for a while, before turning back around, and I saw that the guy was walking along the side of the road toward a small graveyard, a decent ways away from the house. I didn't slow down, because I didn't want him to think I was snooping, or even notice it was my car. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm pretty sure there was something waiting in that cemetery hidden somewhere, and as soon as his buddy told him where it was, he cut him out of the deal and made him get out, and there was nothing the one getting out could do, because he wasn't the one paying, and I think he may have even been scared of the other guy. Weirdest night of my life.